Let's take a look at how stock quantities are tracked in JobPro. So first of all, if we go into Setup and click on Products and Services, and here we can specify some default settings in relation to stock control, tracking of serial numbers, multiple locations, and also tracking of batches as well of serial numbers if relevant. So we can turn on some defaults here. So if, for example, you do normally track stock, then you would turn on this option here first of all. So this is also used as a default for a checkbox in the products file that tells the system to track the quantity in stock for that item. So every time you create a new record in the products module, it'll auto set it to track stock, but obviously you can turn it off or on at that level as well. Then the next option is where we can track items by serial number or individually, and that uses the units module. So the way this works is that if you have an item, for example, on a purchase order and it's tracked by serial numbers, when you receive that item on the PO, it'll prompt you to specify the serial numbers for that item. So you can specify first of all that you do track items individually by serial numbers. Now these are the defaults for products. We'll go into products in a minute and we'll see how we can individually set up these settings for each product. But if the default is also that if you do track items individually, you can specify to automatically generate the serial numbers or to manually enter in the serial numbers. So automatically means that, let's say you assemble goods, and in a assembly job, for example, when you finish the assembly of a particular finished item, it'll auto-generate the serial numbers for the relevant quantity that you just created. But if you manually want to input in the serial numbers for items, for example on purchase orders when you receive items, you can use a barcode scanner, then you'd set it to manually generate the serial numbers. If also we set it to automatically generate serial numbers, we can specify the length of the serial numbers to generate. So here we've got an example on the right hand side, and if we say that the serial length is usually 20, well then it will add a number of zeros to the front of the serial number at that time of what it's incrementing to. The next option here is to specify whether you track batches in the system. Basically, a batch can be tied to a set of items that are tracked individually, like serial number items. So if on a purchase order you receive goods and you specify the serial numbers, at that point you can also link those items to a specific new batch. You can do the same in the assembly functionality that you have in the jobs module, or anywhere in the system that increases stock. So the next option then is also where you're specifying that you track multiple locations. Now turning these last options on here, what they do is they turn on an option in the modules menu for the locations module and for the batches module as well. So if you track stock at multiple locations, then you can turn this option on here. Then the last option here is relating to how stock quantities get updated. So there's the ability to update quantities based on a calculation that looks live at all the data in the system, or alternatively it just sets the value in the product record for what current quantities in stock based on the current value plus or minus what you're either increasing or decreasing out of stock. So using the calculated method is slightly slower than using the set field method. But using the calculated method will always be more accurate because it's based on exact data in the system. While there is this very, very slight possibility using the set field method that if, for example, a machine crashed for some reason, or a record was locked in the products module when the system was attempting to update the stock in that record, maybe another user was using it. So there is very, very slight possibility that stock can get out of sync, but less possibility by using the calculated method. Now there is a feature in the products module to resync stock as well. So it's not something that actually becomes an issue, but it's just that we have this option in here to cover all angles. Okay, so let's just turn off some of these defaults. And what we'll do then is we'll go into the products module and set up a new product. So we click on new. We'll enter in the product name. We can give it a description if needed, specify the type. Now we can also edit these values in setup so you can have your own types appear in this drop down menu. But you'll notice in the stock tracking section here on the general tab of the product screen, when we create a new record, it defaults to the values from setup. So we've defaulted to track stock for this item. Now you can turn that on and off here. So for example, you could be entering in service items in here either. But we'll say cancel to that and leave this turned on. We can also then specify for this particular item whether we track it by serial numbers or individually as well. So similar options that you saw in setup. So let's turn on serial numbers for this item just to give an example of how that works. We generate the serials manually. And what we'll do then is we'll create a purchase order for this item. So we'll just set up a supplier first of all. And then from here we can create a purchase order. Now you can create a purchase order from multiple places, but this is the handiest since we're on this screen already. So now if we put in a quantity of say 10, and when we receive this item into stock, which we can do in a few different ways, it will prompt us then to specify the serial numbers for that item. So one option is to literally click into received, and we can put in a quantity here. Or if we're receiving the full purchase order, we can simply select received here. Okay, so we're going to click on continue as there's balances to be received. And here then we're prompted to specify the serial numbers for these items. So we could use a barcode scanner and scan the actual items coming into stock, and it'll input then the serial numbers in here. Or just for this purpose we'll do a quick auto assign serial numbers, and we'll generate those there. We can also generate a batch at this stage as well to link all these together into one batch. So now we've got a zero balance remaining to be received on this purchase order. So let's go back into products. We take a look at that product record. So we can see on the general tab that there's now a quantity in stock from a cell point of view of 10. Now the reason why we have cell here is because you can have different types of stock locations, like a stock location, a warehouse, that everything in there is a sellable item, or you could have another location that is for rental use, for items that you will rent out or loan on jobs. And then other locations could be internal locations, like an office, where you can track assets that are in use within a building, within an office, or even within vehicles. So location could be a vehicle as well. So if we take a look at the stock tab, where we get a lot more information relating to locations and stock quantities, here we can see in this example we've just got one location in the system. So it's automatically increased the stock at that location by a quantity of 10. We can see a summary on the right hand side as well, that there was history purchases of 10, none have been sold yet. And if we've got multiple stock locations in the system, we can then click on the drop down here and focus the summary here based on a different location. we have a look at the General tab for this item, there's a section on the right hand side, History and Movements for this item. So here we can see that the only history for this particular product is that 10 were received on a purchase order, and we can click on an arrow to view that product movement, and we can see then the items or the serial numbers that were received on that. We can also click print here as well. When you're printing a product movement record, if it includes serial number items, we can include a barcode on that as well. So printing a product movement is very useful for areas like using it as a picking list, for example. So let's return back into products. So just to give a quick recap on some of what we talked about, if you've got multiple stock locations in the system, well then in various places like purchase orders, or when you sell items, or when you use items on a job assembly, for example, you can specify the default location in or the default location out that you're going to use for reducing or increasing the stock quantities for the relevant products. Also, if you track an item by serial number, well then when you increase the stock of that item, like on a PO, or you decrease, like on a shipping record, well then you're prompted to specify the serial numbers that you're using for increasing the stock or for decreasing the stock as well. So there are lots of areas in JobPro that have an effect on the stock quantity. And to give you a look at that, we click on the Stock tab. And there's a little hidden feature here that normally when you click on this arrow to the left of the location, it'll bring you into the location screen in the Locations module. So we'll do that first. And here we are, we're looking at the location in the Locations module, and we can see all the stock currently at that location and the value of that stock as well. But if we go back into products, and when I hover over this arrow, if I hold down the Shift key and click on the arrow, it brings us into a stock related screen that gives you an overview of all the different areas that have an effect on stock. Now this is relevant to what I showed you earlier on the setup area in products and services, where you have the ability to update stock quantities by the system by using either a calculated method or a set field method. So this is a sort of a developer area screen that you can also use as a user, but it gives you a good idea of all the different areas that update stock. So product movements, for example, where you might do an amendment to a stock quantity. It could be like a stock take or setting up your opening balances. Or transferring stock between different locations. So transfers into one location, transfers out of another location. Also, what can update stock is when you create units or introduce assets or any items tracked by serial number into the system. So that could be, for example, where you simply add an item with a serial number into the system instead of needing to do it on a purchase order where you receive the item in from a PO. So it's another way of setting up your opening balances for serial numbers. And also, if you delete a serial number item as well, that'll update stock. Or setting an item that's tracked by serial number to inactive or active, that has an effect on stock. Shipping in. Now the shipping module has the ability to track stock coming in or stock coming out, and also stock that's been shipped direct to a customer. For example, from a drop ship PO, you can then create a shipping record to track the shipping of that or those items to the customer. So we've got a shipping in, that has an effect on stock when it's complete. In other words, it's been received in. Shipping out, so once an item leaves your own location in a shipping out record, well, that'll update stock straight away. Also, shipping out that's complete has the same effect, it updates stock straight away. In JobPro you can assemble items or assemble products as well. So you could set up a job assembly to put together specific finished products. So when you complete job assemblies, they'll be adding those items into stock, and any assembly or costings used on a job assembly, they will be reduced from stock. So components that are used to make up finished products, they get deducted from stock automatically. Also, what affects stock is expenses. So if you log expenses, like which could be costs on a job relating to maybe a service on a particular item, or just using items on jobs or tasks or time logs, and also on contacts expenses screen. So these 4 areas where you can log expenses or costs, if you log items that are stock tracked items, well then they will also reduce from stock here. And that will give you then your current quantity in stock. So that's a sort of an overview of all the different areas in the system that have an effect on stock. If, for example, as mentioned earlier, stock gets out of sync, which is very rare but can happen, then you can click on a button here to sync the current record. Or alternatively, back on the product screen, if we go into options, you can find records with stock quantities out of sync, and you can then resync those quantities. Let's go back into the entry screen in products. Now, after setting up a new product, another way to put in its opening balance at a particular location is to do an amendment. So if we click on the plus button here on the Amendments tab, because we've got multiple stock locations in this system, it's asking us which location are we referring to here. So let's say in the main warehouse in the Cork location, we have a quantity of 5. So we put in 5, and that automatically prompts us to specify the 5 serial numbers. So let's auto assign those. Now if you entered in a duplicate serial number for this product, you'll get a warning here. So now in total we've got 15 of these items, 10 of them in one location and 5 in another. There's a separate video tutorial in relation to tracking stock quantities across multiple locations. But here we can see how you can do a transfer of stock between 2 locations. And when we click continue, we're prompted to specify the 3 serial numbers or 3 items that we're removing or moving to the other location. So if we click on this link here, it'll just flag the first 3 items automatically. We click continue. And if we have a look at the general tab, we can see here then that there was a transfer between these 2 locations of quantity of 3. And we could view that and print that off here, including the barcode, like a picking list. From a stock point of view, the shipping module covers stock incoming and outgoing as well as direct shipping to customers. So let's take a very quick look at the shipping module. More information on the shipping module is covered in separate video tutorials, so we'll just give a quick summary of it in here. For the shipping module, basically, if you have an incoming shipping record here, once that's set to complete, it increases the stock for that item. We can see here that the shipping record was automatically created from a purchase order when the purchase order was received. So shipping records are created in the background, or they can also be created by the user to track shipping when the shipment is actually happening. So for example, maybe there's an order coming from a customer over in China, and it might take 2 weeks to come over on a boat. So you could create a shipping in record in advance and track that using the tracking functionality in shipping. So that would tie into the relevant carrier that you're using. And in here you could put in a tracking number and be able to interact with the carrier's website directly from within JobPro. So also the shipping module covers shipping out. So if we create a new record, outgoing, specify who the customer is, and then put in some items. Because this item is tracked by serial numbers, we need to specify which particular ones we're using. So now this item here will be reduced in stock by that quantity of 5. And when we print the document, we can include the serial numbers on it as well. So for users of JobPro that don't necessarily want to create shipping records, there's a preference in setup to say that when you invoice a customer, for example, an auto invoice from a sales order record, you can specify to also automatically create a shipping record for those items so that the stock gets reduced straight away. So the shipping module plays a large part in the increasing and decreasing of stock. Further information regarding the tracking of stock quantities is covered in each relevant module video tutorial.